Crock Talk TV podcast. Peace. Welcome to another episode of Real Talk Fantasy Football. I am your host, Eric Crocker, and of course, as always, I'm joined by my co-host, Jason Aponte. How you doing, man? Fresh from California.
Fresh from California, a little bit of sunburn, but you know it's all good. I learned a lesson about that Cali heat, and well, it's not really the heat, sun. Just have to throw a little sunscreen on, just a little bit.
Yeah. And was that your first time going to Cali, or you been there?
No, I had been there. We went out there for Andrew's Pro Day not that long ago. If you
okay,
remember.
I remember that.
Yeah, but this
when you had the all
black
on with the white cleats.
Yeah, oh no, that was me. But you said you didn't really like it, the contract and everything.
That's what I said. When you had the all black on with the white cleats.
I was kind of disappointed because I thought I did a really good job picking out my drip and everything. But like when you say I'm not really feeling it, it kind of like knocks you down a little bit. But it's all right. You learn.
I think you did it as good as you could. Like for someone like for me not to like, that's not something I would do. But I think you pulled it off. You did well. All
right. Well, I'll take that. But yeah, this is the first time out there, being at the facility, covering training camp, which was a blast. Got to meet a whole bunch of people, watch the team. So it was really a great time, honestly. Can't wait to get to LA next week, though, so we could cover these joint practices, man.
That's going to be awesome, man. But, of course, speaking of LA, speaking of the 49ers and the Chargers, today we're talking about the AFC West. All right. And I think, should we start with the heavy hitters? Matter of fact, if you guys haven't already, go back through. We've had a few other episodes, and we went over the NFC West. We went over the AFC East and NFC East. So those are the three divisions that we have currently going over. And then today, obviously, we are covering the AFC West, which, you have the Chiefs, you have the Chargers, you have the Raiders, and the Broncos. So everything when it comes to your fantasy needs for these guys, we're going through all that, what players to watch, what players you should be high on, down on. My guy Jason Aponte, he's well versed with all this knowledge of all these players and teams and how they'll be utilized. So we're going to get into all that and more. But first, make sure, if you're not already, subscribe to the YouTube channel. All right, head over to YouTube, hit that subscribe button right now, hit the like button right now. It helps with all the algorithms and stuff. We got over 80 people in here already, and it's climbing, so that's pretty cool. I appreciate all the support. Everybody watching from Periscope, YouTube, we appreciate you guys. All right, this show is also powered by Underdog Fantasy, so if you haven't already, go to underdogfantasy.com or download the Underdog Fantasy app. Use promo code Crocky when you sign up. And when you deposit a minimum of $10, you get an additional $25 thrown into your account. All right, just by using the promo code Crocky. So promo code Crocky, CROCKY. Make sure you guys go do that. And Underdog Fantasy, I think you just hear fantasy, but it's much more than just a fantasy app. And I don't know how much you've utilized it yet, Jason, but you got the pick'ems. You got the and the pick'em is really cool because it could be one game, right? Say it's the 49ers against the Lions. Mm-hmm. And it's going to say like Brandon Ayuk versus whoever the Lions number one receiver is. I don't even know who it is.
Tyrell Williams.
Tyrell Williams. All right. So it'd be like Brandon Ayuk versus Tyrell Williams. And then what they do is they'll have like maybe a plus or minus for one of the guys. So, Ayuk is probably going to, be scheduled to have more yards or whatever. But you get to kind of wager on who's going to have more yards. And you also get to kind of really stack those up. And it's really cool. You get to parlay it. So they got all kind of cool things that they do. So make sure, again, you guys download the Underdog Fantasy app. Promo code Crocky. When you deposit $10, you get an additional $25 into your account. All right. But let's go. Let's get into it. Let's talk about first. We got to go with the defending AFC champions, right? You got the Kansas City Chiefs. And this whole thing, everything goes. It starts with the quarterback, Patrick Mahomes. All right. Now, I think this is an intriguing guy because whether it's daily fantasy, whether it's, leagues or whatever, like this is a guy that's going to be highly sought after, right? So with Patrick Mahomes, how high are you drafting this guy? And are you expecting the same type of seasons that he's had in the previous 2-3 years?
Yeah, I don't really think you should overthink it when it comes to Mahomes. He's a top 1, 2, 3 guy. When he's right and he's upright, he's probably gives you the best chance and the highest floor with the highest ceiling because we know what this offense is looking like. Remember, they beefed up their offensive line. And you know, they have their weapons, Kelsey, Hill. This is legitimately probably the only team in fantasy football that could have 3 players finish at the number 1 spot in each position. I'm talking about Tyreek Hill, Travis Kelsey, Patrick Mahomes. In terms of where you would be drafting him, I'm not too high on drafting quarterbacks very high in single quarterback leagues, right? I feel like there's too much value into getting yourself another stud wide receiver, maybe locking in another running back, as opposed to, you know, the difference between, you know, let's say Patrick Mahomes, Kyler Murray, Josh Allen. It's a lot closer than people think. Remember, Kyler Murray was the number 1 overall quarterback last year. Josh Allen was right behind. Patrick Mahomes is 3rd. You'll be fine with that. But when it comes to that, there's no positional advantage, right? When you have Travis Kelsey and everyone else is drafting tight ends from the league, you have a positional advantage every single week. There's a point to doing that. With Patrick Mahomes in single quarterback leagues, yeah, you're going to get those big games and you're going to get all that, but how high are you willing to do it? I've seen him go as high as the 2nd round. That's too rich for my blood. I would never do that in the 2nd round in the second quarterback and in a single quarterback league. So I wouldn't reach too high, but honestly, you really shouldn't overthink it when it comes to Patrick Mahomes. If you want to lock in that every single week matchup proof quarterback and not look back, then go for it. I have no problem with it, but for my liking, I feel like when you build your fantasy roster, you can have a better chance at building a stronger roster if maybe you let someone else draft Mahomes and you go after somebody like a Ryan Tannehill at the back end who has a really good chance to be top 10 and be very solid for you in this offense now that he has Julio Jones and A.J. Brown. So I'm not telling you to fade Patrick Mahomes. I'm just saying in the 2nd round, that's a little bit too high when you can get your hands on a great running back, a great wide receiver.
Now, you brought up Tannehill, and that's a team, you know, with the Tennessee Titans, they lean a lot on the run game. And it feels like Kansas City Chiefs, they do the exact opposite, right? Mm-hmm. But they have this young stud running back, Clyde Edwards-Helaire, who a lot of people, I felt like after his first game last year, they're like, wait a minute, should we be running to pick this guy up and claim him or make sure that we have him? I know a lot of people drafted him. So what are your thoughts on him? Because I feel like he kind of started off where it was like, oh, man, this is a guy that, I'm glad I have him. And then as the season went on, it just kind of tapered off.
Right, and I think you hit the nail on the head. Week 1, people were taking their victory laps. Oh, my goodness, look at Clyde Edwards-Helaire. You know, they took him in the 1st round. Game 1, 25, 138 touchdown, right? And that's exactly what you're looking for, especially considering how uncertain everything was looking last year in 2020, right? Nobody had any idea what football would look like during COVID, and he comes right out of the gate as a rookie, scores a touchdown. Unfortunately, like you said, it tapered off really quick. People took their victory laps a little bit too early, and that's what I'm talking about with fantasy football, the sample sizes. Don't get all crazy over 1 week. Don't overreact one way or the other. So he only topped 100 yards one more time last year, and that was against Buffalo. He had like 161, and he had games with like 7 touches, 10 touches only. He had a tough time getting into the end zone. So last year, I felt like he was a little bit overvalued. People got really excited because they want to have that running back that's in this system. We saw Damien Williams win people championships the year before. You saw LaShawn McCoy in that offense, or you saw anybody that was in that offense actually be able to contribute for you week to week. And that's what you thought you were getting. So here's the thing. While he was overvalued last year, I feel like he's being undervalued this year. And he could be a steal. He's currently ranked 13th. According to fantasy football calculator, 13. So that doesn't scream undervalued, but what I'm saying is as an RB2, because it's after 12, everything else is RB2, he is an RB2 with a chance to be a top 5 because I suspect that the touchdowns are going to happen. He struggled with goal line carries. That's why Kansas City went ahead. They tried to bring in Le'Veon Bell. That failed spectacularly because they didn't have a guy who could punch it in. Sure, Darrell Williams is there. I'm not really too worried about it. I think that the kid is due for some positive touchdown regression. And when you talk about an RB2 with a chance to take a leap into the top 5, I think that he has the best chance when you start to look at who's around him. So I really now, maybe his ADP is going to climb a little bit, but 13th, that's actually pretty good. Now, consider something like this. Let's say you start at the 12th pick and you go, let's say everybody went running back heavy and you go Davante Adams, Travis Kelsey. Boom, boom. That's a beautiful start, right? And then you could swing back around depending on how your draft goes in the 3rd round and get Clyde Edwards-Helaire. I know you don't really want to double dip when it comes to the same teams, but he could be an RB1 with a safe floor. So I really think that this year he is a little bit undervalued and people are kind of just sleeping on him just a little, even though he's ranked 13th according to fantasy football calculator.
Man, and he is someone who not only, obviously like runs the ball well, especially when they're trying to run it, which they went away from in the Super Bowl. I never understand that. It's like you got your quarterback, he's running around for his life. and trying to put everything on his back. And I get it. I mean, you had all the offensive linemen that were out, but the team was averaging like 6 yards of rush, and they just decided to disregard the rushing game entirely. We'll see if they continue to do that this year. But even if they do, Clyde Edwards-Helaire is somebody who is also good in the passing game. So, he can help you, especially like in the PPR league. He might be a running back that, is intriguing because of that aspect of his game and how they might utilize him, especially to get him out there in space. But you go to the receivers, and we'll include Travis Kelsey in this. They have some heavy hitters. All right. But I think everybody knows about Travis Kelsey and what he's going to give you, especially on a consistent basis. I mean, he's a high volume pass catcher guy. Tyreek Hill, they're going to throw the ball to him a ton and get him the ball downfield in space. He's going to produce tremendously for you. But it's the other guy I think people really want to know about, and that's Mikko Hartman. So what are your thoughts on Mikko Hartman?
Mikko Hartman's a perfect target. Like he's right now being ranked in between guys like Mike Williams, and I don't think that they have as much upside. Everybody's been chasing the wide receiver 2 in this offense, right? For a little while, it was Demarcus Robinson last year. They tried Chris Conley. Everybody's always been chasing the wide receiver 2. And I mean, I try to stay away from that. But if you're talking about late swings at the end of drafts or in those rounds when it kind of dries up, I would definitely take a shot on Mikko Hartman because he has so much upside. He almost profiles just like Travis Kelsey, like Tyreek Hill in terms of speed. And it seems like they're going to be putting him in the number 2 role. There's nobody in his way anymore. DeMarcus Robinson is not going to be taking anything away from him at this point. Chris Conley is actually sitting.
What about Cornell Powell? Because we got a question about Cornell Powell here.
Cornell Powell.
You're not projecting that, are you?
No, I'm not. I don't think so yet. I have to see a little bit more. Maybe Saturday we're going to get a good glimpse of that, right? They play the 49ers on Saturday.
Yep.
So we'll get a chance to take a look at him. Let's see what happens. So, I mean, so that's the thing, right? Everything that we're telling you on August 11th is fluid. And with preseason starting, we're going to find out a lot about how people are going to be utilized. And I think that if we start to see a little bit more from Mikko Hartman, he could be a guy when you know that the Chiefs are going to have to air the ball out or they're going to be in a shootout, then that's a guy that I want to play, 1, in daily fantasy, or 2, try to plug in my flex if I feel like the guy who I'm facing or girl that I'm facing this week has a leg up on me and I need a little bit of a home run swing. So it's going to be really interesting to watch Mikko Hartman. That's the person that everybody should be looking at, and he's not really expensive at this point, so I would love to take a shot on him as well too. I really like him in that range.
All right, now let's actually move on. All right, and let's talk about the Los Angeles Chargers. And I actually had one comment here already, and someone said Justin Herbert, they take him over Mahomes when it comes to drafting quarterbacks in his division. Now, is this a question or a comment based on the fact that you can get Justin Herbert lower? And are you even going to get him that much lower? Or is this just in general, if you had to pick between the two guys, you're going with Justin Herbert? What do you think?
See, I don't know. With this one, it's going to be tough because I think everybody's going to run to him after what they saw last year. And then you start to think about, okay, now this offense is going to have the Saints passing game coordinator over there. I believe his name is Lombardi. I can't remember his first name, right? So he has plans for how he wants to have this offense look, which is good about the guys that we're going to get to talk about, Austin Eckler, and all the other parts. Herbert's going to be a top 5, top 7 guy, though. Like, that's not going to be too much of a drop-off when it comes to where he's going to go, right? So you could make it, Kyler, Mahomes, Allen, Aaron Rodgers is back, so now he's got to be in that conversation. So he's in that top 5 conversation. The drop-off, I mean, I could imagine that the points per game would probably be a lot closer than possible. So if you want to do that, I believe if you're talking about price, then you probably could get Justin Herbert later and still get similar production. I'm not right now ready to project him higher than Mahomes, but there is a world where it happens, especially considering what you saw last year with him right out of the gates. And now they have a new offense that feels a lot more fresh, a lot more modern. No knock on Anthony Lynn, but a lot of the stuff that they were doing, all those deep shots that he was taking, that was Herbert. That wasn't things that he was really dialing up. He wanted to keep everything in front of them. So yeah, I mean, I can see the logic, and if you want to wait for the cheaper quarterback, go for it. I hear you.
Now, also, I mean, the Chargers are kind of in the same situation as Kansas City, where they got this running back, but the running game hasn't been anything that's sustainable, right? You got Austin Eckler, he's probably their main guy. You got Kelly behind him, but Eckler is a 3-down back. I think I just heard him. Saw some comments about him saying, hey, for your fantasy teams, you guys need to draft me, right? And I don't know. I feel like that's never a good thing if you got a guy that's out there campaigning for people to draft him in the fantasy league. So how high are you taking him? Because he is a dual threat type running back. He can pass catch. He's a decent running back, but he's not someone that has put up big numbers.
Well, I'll say this. anytime a football player leans into fantasy football, I adjust my rankings and move them up my board, right? Because so many guys, unfortunately, there's such a large subset of fantasy football players that are horrible and tweet at players when they don't play well, and they say, I don't care about your fantasy teams. Fine, you definitely don't have to. You're doing your job, and that's fine. But I kind of like it when players do that. So I think that Austin Eckler is a top 10 guy, and here's why. So we're talking about the Saints bringing over their offense. So who was the guy, the pass catcher, especially when Michael Thomas wasn't there? Alvin Kamara. And Alvin Kamara in PPR is money. I could see a world where Austin Eckler is going to get a ton of targets. Now, when you talk about the depth behind him, that's another thing that really gets me excited. So you mentioned Kelly. Kelly was actually ahead as far as snap share. He fell out of favor real quick when he stopped pass blocking. Anthony Lynn didn't want him. He's kind of fallen back. Justin Jackson has kind of jumped over him. So he's in front of him right behind Austin Eckler right now. But you're absolutely right. 3 down back, PPR. He's a top 10 guy. He's ranked right now behind Saquon Barkley and in front of Najee Harris. Now, that's going to be a little bit tougher. So when you're talking about that, I'm projecting Najee Harris as a 300-touch guy. There's nobody in his way over there. And Pittsburgh desperately wants to get back to running the football because they did not do that last year. I know they're going to feed him, and he actually is showing some really, really good highlights, at least in camp, of catching the ball. I think that Ben's arm is a little bit diminished. He's going to be a lot closer to the line of scrimmage, so they'll get him the ball as well, too. So Austin Eckler, though, give me the guy in the better offense. So it's going to be really interesting to see where Saquon Barkley falls because now we're kind of finding out he's off a pup. Looks like he'll be there week 1. Now, what do you do when you're faced with Barkley, Eckler, Harris? Who's safer out of those 3? Probably Najee, but the guy who is going to be the week safe play, I believe, is going to be Austin Eckler.
I'm reading his comments right here. I said, do y'all know Coach Jason Brown? He was the coach 1 year. Last chance is you. He thinks Herbert will have a sophomore slump. What do you think? I think he's talking about Jason Brown. Is that the one that was like cussing everybody out? He was from Compton, the big white dude.
That is. Why all the Jasons got to curse so much?
I know. Well, I don't know if I'll be taking his fantasy advice, but I mean, if he's good at fantasy, then maybe he knows something. I think it's easier to say that someone's going to have a sophomore slump than it is to say that somebody's going to be good year 2, right? I think a lot of people want to try to go against the grain a little bit. And then if he's wrong, it's like, probably nobody even remembers that he said it. But if he's right, then he's going to walk around, pumping his chest like, oh, yeah, I said this was going to happen.
Right. And there's a difference between slump and regression. Justin Herbert is absolutely a candidate for regression. It is almost impossible to duplicate what he did last year in his first year. Now, there is a world where, hey, maybe he's learned a bunch and maybe it gets better. But what he did was it was unseen, right? And it's hard to duplicate. So, what do I project? What do I predict? There's a world where Justin Herbert is a top 5 quarterback and regresses. That's the beauty of fantasy football. So would I say slump? No. Regression? Probably, because it's so hard to duplicate what he did last year. It was record-breaking what he did.
Right. Now let's talk about some of his pass catchers. I mean, lost Hunter Henry. I mean, that was a guy that was kind of, up and down anyways. I mean, with his injuries and whatnot. Mm-hmm. You got Keenan Allen. I think that's the first guy that kind of jumps in your head about, just pass catchers that they have. But he was, for the first time in a while, he didn't have 1,000 yards receiving. His numbers were a little down. He was scoring some touchdowns. I can't think off the top of my head exactly how many, but with the receivers that they have, and they have some young guys coming up too, right? So you got Keenan Allen, who's, the guy. You got Mike Williams. I think they're expecting a big year out of him. But then behind him, you got guys like Guyton. All right. So how do you look at just this receiving core? And what was your outlook on that from drafting them standpoint?
So as far as Keenan Allen goes, he really covered up that under 1,000 yards for the first time in a long time with 8 touchdowns, career high, tied his rookie year. So that really, again, in fantasy points, that's all that matters. Those touchdowns are important. And he showed great chemistry with Herbert. We all know one of the most underappreciated route runners in this game. Whenever you hear route runners, people do not bring him up. He is an absolute magician. And he's been, even though I did see that clip today of Asante Samuel Jr. putting the clamps on him. Yes, that was a very, very impressive rep because that man knows how to get himself open. I'm not really too worried about it. Right now, he is ranked 9th according to Fantasy Football Calculator between A.J. Brown and Terry McLaurin. Again, A.J. Brown's got to deal with Julio Jones. Julio Jones isn't there for show. Terry McLaurin is not in a better offense. Keenan Allen feels safer. I'm with Keenan Allen if you're talking about those 3. If A.J. Brown was by himself, then I'm all in on A.J. Brown. A.J. Brown was going to have 130, 140 targets. Now you talk about how they run that offense through Derrick Henry. Julio Jones is not a ghost. And that's kind of what's bumping him down. If this was a normal year, A.J. Brown to the moon, but Keenan Allen's going to be fine, I think. I really wanted to talk about Mike Williams, though, and I'm glad that you brought him up because Lombardi keeps talking about using him in this X role. And if you listen to him talk on the PFF Fantasy Football Show with Ian Hartitz, he's talking about, I'm about to get more targets than I've ever gotten, ever. And this new offense feels very fresh. Again, it's more modern. Anthony Lynn, no knock against him. The offense was a little bit dated when it came to that, which makes everything that happened last year a lot more
He was a running back
impressive.
coach when I was with the Jets. But go ahead.
Really? And that's awesome. And he was look, so when he took over, he was in Buffalo. He took over as the head coach for a little while. I think it was right after they got rid of Rex Ryan. And he got Shady McCoy going. So that's his thing, right? To get running backs going. So again, all of that offense, all those things considered, it's impressive what they did. So Mike Williams has a real good chance. Mike Williams is going to be somebody that's going to be like lost in the sauce, in the shuffle. And I would take a shot on him as my wide receiver 5 and 6 and see what happens because he's still got big plays in him. He still made really great catches. He's a bit of a deep threat as well, too. When you pair that with Justin Herbert, he could be a value and somebody who could fetch himself a top 25 finish as long as he gets those targets that he was talking about. I'm really excited about his prospects this year.
Yeah, man. So, yeah, no, I mean, there's definitely some weapons over there, and they're going to definitely all contribute to what type of season we'll end up seeing from our guy Justin Herbert and see if he ends up having that sophomore slump or if he turns it up and actually takes it to another step. And we've seen it recently in recent years by another quarterback in that same division, right? We're talking about Patrick Mahomes. And, I mean, he's been special. I don't want to make him the standard for how young quarterbacks are supposed to come in the league and can consistently contribute. But you do have a coaching change over there in L.A., and we'll see how Justin Herbert adjusts. But sounds like, again, like you said, more modern offense that's supposed to be more open and get guys going. All right. Yep. Again, guys, I want to talk to you guys again. If you haven't already, make sure you guys subscribe to the YouTube channel. All right, hit that subscribe button right now. Hit the like button right now. And Underdog Fantasy, download the app. When you deposit a minimum of $10, put promo code Crocky, you'll get an additional $25 into your account. I'm telling you, it's not just a fantasy app. Like, it's a wager app, aka betting, gambling. All right, so a lot of fun on that app, a lot of cool stuff, whether it's baseball, football, basketball, all that. So it's not just a regular fantasy app, man. You guys really need to check it out. Put in promo code Crocker, and you're getting an additional $25 into your account. All right, so, and you can see it right there. Now, let's move on, man. We got 2 more teams we're firing through here. All right, and one. Let's go with the Raiders, man. Let's go with the Raiders. And I don't even have the notes up in front of me right now, but let's go with the Raiders. And I look at the Raiders because very intriguing team. All right, and I'll just kind of gloss over a little bit of what I think about this team and maybe next step. Actually, let's skip over. Usually we start with the quarterbacks and the running backs. But I want to jump straight to these receivers because that's probably the most polarizing position with the Raiders, especially from a fantasy aspect. And you just don't know what you're going to get. You have 2 receivers, Henry Ruggs, Bryan Edwards. Both of those guys as rookies were kind of, Edwards was really kind of non-existent, and they just weren't utilizing him. And this was a guy, Bryan Edwards was my wide receiver 5 in his class, and I actually had him ahead of Henry Ruggs. And it was just like, we're only going to throw to him once a game. Not too much, right? I mean, he dealt with some injuries and stuff, but hopefully they find that consistency with him. And it sounds like so far in training camp, he's been killing it, which I expect because he's that type of receiver. That's why I had him so high, man. All around receiver. They're talking about Randy Moss and Terrell Owens as his player comps. Now, I'm not going to go that far. I think that was Gruden that said that crazy stuff. I ain't going to go that far. But as far as him being like a terrific receiver with a very good, well-rounded game and can be your legit X, he's that guy. All right. Yeah. So you got Bryan Edwards, and we'll see what happens with him. But then you got Henry Ruggs as well. And he was kind of up and down. And my main thing with Henry Ruggs was I felt like he did not have high-end control speed. And just having 4.2 speed is not good enough to be good in the NFL. Like, you got to have more than that. You got to be able to threaten guys on a consistent basis with your speed and use that to win on underneath routes. And I guess he just didn't do that very well, and he has to learn that aspect of his game. We'll see if he did this year, but what do you think about these guys from a fantasy standpoint?
Well, when it comes to Henry Ruggs, I was big on Henry Ruggs, and I just hated the landing spot just because him and Carr's game, they don't mesh well. He's quick, intermediate. Carr wants to get the ball out of there quick, but I was missing some of the things that you were talking about, like those slants that Ruggs can get and take to the house, right? So he would blow up here and there. He was a popular guy that I had on a bunch of my teams. I just kept waiting for it to happen. It didn't happen. When it comes to Bryan Edwards, right, the Raiders brought in John Brown, who I'm a huge fan of, right? I love John Brown. Again, it doesn't really mesh though with Carr, right? A deep threat guy, even though that I think that a little bit of what he does in the intermediate gets glossed over. But Bryan Edwards is running ahead of him right now. And again, this is what he did last camp. Bryan Edwards was killing it last camp. This is a popular guy to bring in and just wait on your bench and see what happens. So it's really going to come down to what happens with this offensive line, Croc. I mean, they were loaded at the line, and it seems like they just sold all their parts off. And I don't understand from a roster construction, portion of it, why you would do something like that. And it didn't make any sense. So what did they do? They got rid of almost all their good linemen, and they brought in Kenyon Drake. It doesn't make sense, Croc. Make it make sense for me. Do you have any sort of insight to it? Because to me, that screams you got to get the ball out of your hands really fast, because that line is going to get whipped, especially against really good defensive lines, when you let all of those studs walk for no reason and just trade them for nothing.
All right. Well, we didn't talk about Hunter Renfrow. And I see the comment here, and somebody was like, "Hey, man, Clemson Tiger." That's right. He said that's the Raiders' best receiver, and I'm actually not going to argue against that from a standpoint of like knowing exactly what you're going to get, like the consistency of him. He definitely gets open. He does work all levels of the field. I mean, I think he's a little slept on in this because he's not the splashy player. He's not the flashy player, but he is somebody that consistently just does the job when he's called upon, and he returns punts as well. So what are your thoughts a little bit? Tell us a little bit about Renfrow. Matter of fact, if it were up to you, are you drafting Renfrow over Bryan Edwards and Henry Ruggs?
Not Ruggs, but definitely I would take Edwards, not over Ruggs, but I would take Edwards over Renfrow. Renfrow's safe, right? In a PPR league, you can find him on the waiver wire on a week that you probably need like maybe 10 points, right? Let's say your roster's loaded and it's the day before, or it's the day of, and you wake up and one of your players is inactive and you got to pick somebody up. Hunter Renfrow will be fine. 5 catches, 50 yards, boom, 10 PPR points. That's really all you could really ask for. He doesn't really have too much upside. He's got to score more touchdowns. He's got to get the ball down the field. He has to have like 10 catches and 100 yards for you to really have a boom week. Where Bryan Edwards is way more upside. You talked about the physical gifts as well. But I just have a sneaky feeling that Henry Ruggs they have to use him better. They just have to use him better this year. So I'm always going to take the swing on the upside, especially because Ruggs is going to go way later in your drafts. The shine is off of him right now. People aren't really big on him. So if you're asking me right now, until I see something different, Ruggs, Edwards, Renfrow, and maybe even Smokey Brown if we find out how they're going to use him.
And where are you at with the running game? You talked about how they brought in Kenyon Drake. Is that going to take away some of the touches from Jacobs?
Yes. What is this? What is this with the Raiders and not wanting to get Josh Jacobs the ball in space with catches? I don't understand. All this man needs is a bump a little bit, and it seems like they're doing everything they can to not pass him the ball out of the backfield. Look, he'll probably get the goal line work. Kenyon Drake, though, really spoke glowingly about what they plan to do with him there and how much he complained about what was going on in Arizona in terms of the split and how he didn't like how he was being used. So it's going to be really interesting to find out. The problem is with Josh Jacobs, right? 19th. Now you're getting into that range, right, where we talked about Montgomery, Carson, Swift, who's injured right now. Swift is injured, and they don't know like when he's going to come back. Not saying that he won't be ready for week 1, but that is something to keep in your mind, especially if you're doing drafts soon or about to. Miles Sanders, Myles Gaskin. If Josh Jacobs and Chris Carson and David Montgomery are there, I'm taking Montgomery and Carson all day, especially with Montgomery having Tariq Cohen on the shelf, and Chris Carson's going to get all that work. Josh Jacobs scares the hell out of me, and then toss him that line. That line's not going to be able to run block. It's going to be really bad. I don't know what the Raiders are thinking. So Josh Jacobs feels like a trap for me right now at 19. I'm going to be trying to avoid him as much as I can. And Kenyon Drake could be somebody that you could have at the end, later in your draft, not the end, later in your draft, who's probably going to be more of the pass catcher. I believe they brought him in to catch the ball and take that off of Josh Jacobs' plate. But that's frustrating, especially for Josh Jacobs dynasty owners. It's like, man, get this guy 35, 40 catches, and that raises his floor significantly. It just seems like the Raiders don't want to do that at all. And I really don't have a good answer for it.
Well, we'd be remiss to not talk about the guy that's supposed to be distributing the ball to all these guys, and we're talking about Derek Carr. And Mr. Carr is interesting because, I heard you earlier say about, talk about how he wants to get the ball out of his hands pretty quick and how that doesn't mesh with Ruggs and what he does. The interesting thing was he was throwing the ball downfield to Aguilar. So
I
it's
was about
like,
to say that. Yeah.
is that something that we can see maybe Ruggs grow into a role, or did he just not feel comfortable with Ruggs? And maybe they've been working on that chemistry to get the ball downfield to him. Like, what are you expecting from him? Because he's been a guy that I think people look to as kind of an average quarterback, and I think you're solid. Like, especially when you talked about one quarterback leagues, he's probably going to get a guy that's going to get later in the draft. But are you expecting maybe an uptick in numbers from him, or do you think we're going to see a lot of what we've seen, just barely pedestrian numbers from Carr?
Right. So, I mean, the thing is that's the hope. The hope is that Ruggs takes that Aguilar role. Aguilar was awful in Philly, right? And then he shows up and he was insanely efficient. We talked about him when we did the preview. He's over in New England and how efficient he was on his targets. But you're right. It was down the field. He was open. He made catches. So that's the hope. You want to see Henry Ruggs take that. And you hope that that's what they're working on. So I agree with you there. It's funny. Derek Carr actually set a career high in passing yards last year. That's crazy, right? His completion percentage wasn't far off from a career high. There was a year where he completed 70% of his passes. I think he was at 69, which is nice. That's a very nice completion percentage. But his main targets last year, he really just got the ball to Darren Waller and to Nelson Aguilar last year. So it's going to be interesting to see how all this meshes now, right? Waller's on the shelf right now for a little bit. I really wouldn't panic on that. Waller is my number 2 tight end. Sorry, I love George Kittle, but what I know is Carr's going to feed that man all day, and he's a stud. I love that kid. So Waller, hopefully Ruggs takes that Aguilar role, and Carr could be somebody that you can use week to week. Again, analyze the matchup. If it's going against a defense that gives up a ton to the quarterback, then play him and pick him up on the waiver wire. But if you have one of those top-end guys, you're not going to be mixing and matching. It's just for those people who, like myself, sometimes in drafts, maybe I won't go the whole draft without drafting a quarterback, and I'll wait to the last round. Carr would be somebody who is going to be available then. I don't know if I draft him, but he's week to week. He's got streaming appeal.
Yeah, we got Jamal Armstrong here, and he says, if you get a chance, go and watch Chris Collinsworth's podcast with Derek Carr. He talked glowingly about Aguilar, and you could tell how in tune they were. He's going to miss him this year. And I agree. I mean, that was the guy when everybody thought it was going to be Brian Edwards because he had a strong training camp. When everybody thought it was going to be Henry Ruggs because he was taken 12th overall, it ended up being Aguilar and him really cashing in on that season and taking that to New England, where we'll see if he ends up doing better. But, man, the Raiders couldn't match that. I think, and that's a tough situation, especially when it comes to roster building. Like, we drafted these 2 guys, and really they drafted the other guy too out of Kentucky, but they ended up trading him like before they even played him to Miami.
Lynn Bowden?
Yeah, that was crazy.
Yeah,
but man, it's gonna be interesting to see how like all those do. Does Aguilar end up having the same season? I guess it doesn't matter because he's paid now. But that was a guy you could tell that they definitely were in tune. And now, man, the last team, we got Denver Broncos, and I think this is another team that's a little bit kind of all over the place with how you kind of see things playing out. One, we don't even know who their quarterback is. So are you staying away from both of these guys? You got Drew Lock, you got Teddy Bridgewater. I think neither one of them are really good in fantasy. One turns the ball over a ton. The other one checks the ball down the 10. But how do you feel about the quarterbacks?
Yeah, I mean, so much of what is going to happen with these Denver pass catchers has to do with who's going to be the quarterback, right? So I'm staying away from both these guys in single quarterback leagues. In 2 quarterback leagues, I would pick whoever the starting quarterback is and just have him as your 3rd quarterback. If you're asking me who I want Teddy. Because when you look at what happened last year and a direct result of what happened to Jerry Judy, and I want you to talk about what you saw with Jerry Judy, coming out of college and everything. But a direct result of what we saw with Jerry Judy was, 1, the drops. We know that happened. But he also led the league in uncatchable targets, with 20% of his targets being uncatchable. Drops is one thing. Not even being able to catch the ball is a whole other thing. Drew Lock is wildly inaccurate. 59% completion percentage last year. Are you kidding me? Like, honestly, last year, Teddy Bridgewater, who does check the ball down a ton, you're right, and he missed a whole bunch of opportunities down the field when you watch on the tape. DJ Moore's running free. Robbie Anderson's running free. Curtis Samuel's running free. 69% completion percentage, and he supported 2 top 25 wide receivers. Robbie Anderson finished last year 15th in PPR. DJ Moore finished 23rd. So what does that mean? In PPR, it doesn't matter about the depth of target. You want your guy to catch the ball, and Jerry Judy's the guy who can make something happen after the play. So if you're asking me to lean, please let Teddy Bridgewater win this job, because that's only going to help the rest of these pass catchers that we're about to get into in a bit.
Yeah, now Jerry Judy, man, and when he was coming out of college, that was one thing I noticed. It was really weird to see like you. I mean, not even weird. It was interesting. One of the best route runners I've seen coming out of college. And I think everybody could agree on that. Like just the way he was able to, the speed he was able to play at. I talked about Henry Ruggs and him not having high-end controlled speed. Well, with Jerry Judy, it was a complete opposite. Amazing high-end controlled speed. The dude was electrifying from that standpoint, running his routes at full speed, being able to sit him down and get in and out of his breaks. The issue was he didn't necessarily play very well when bodies were around him, whether he was getting alligator arms or whether he just maybe loses concentration because there's a defensive back on his back. It led to a bunch of drops at the collegiate level. And my thing was like, man, how is that going to translate to the NFL? Because the passing windows they shrink a little bit. You know, you're not going to get as much separation as you got in college, especially with him. He was playing in a slot a lot, having more favorable matchups. He's going to have that same opportunity in the NFL. And you see his numbers, and I'm not going to act like I watched a bunch of Broncos games, but I know out of all the rookies, he led them in drops. So it's like, all right, is that something that's going to get better? Maybe Courtland Sutton coming back. You know, obviously he's coming off of a torn ACL, but maybe does he take a little bit of pressure off of Jerry Judy? Maybe he's not pressing as much, and maybe that improves his catch drop rate. What do you think? Is that something that worries you a little bit about Jerry Judy's game?
I actually think that's going to regress to the mean. He can't drop as many passes again, right? He can't. Like it's just impossible, right, for you to do that unless you're not working on those things. And I think that a lot of that, what had to do with that is just the uncertainty with Locke and everything as well too. So I'm actually going to take the positive route. And I think that right now where he's being ranked, he's in between Kenny Golladay and Devontae Smith. And both of those guys are banged up right now. So I think that he's actually going to be better with it. It's hard to say for sure, but he can't be as bad with the drops, right? Like it has to get better, and that's kind of what I'm hanging my hat on. When it comes to Cortland Sutton, that's a lot harder to predict. He was a stud in 2019. Last year, one game got his season taken away because of an injury, but he does have some rapport with Drew Lock, right? He played 5 games with him at the end of 2019. So his first game started with a bang, 4 catches, 74 yards, 2 touchdowns. But then after that, he only got over that hump once with one game over 79 yards with many and like 23, 25, 40 yards. But the targets were there. 5, 7, 10, 10, and 8. Now, what does that tell you? He's not bringing all of those in because Locke is wildly inaccurate. So I think that it's going to be it's going to be very interesting to see how Cortland Sutton's game meshes with Teddy Bridgewater because he is a contested catch guy. He is a little bit more down the field. So is Teddy going to change his style up? I don't know. But right now where he's going, he's actually 32nd, which is 2 spots behind Jerry Judy. So it's going to be, they're right there with those 2 guys. But again, so much of where these guys go is going to be with the quarterback.
Whew, that's tough. I mean, we're talking about 2 guys that it's just like, I just can't depend on either one of those guys. And the crazy thing, we'll see how this all plays out. And I was one of those that was just like, man, it's hard to just give up on Drew Lock right now. But they did have an opportunity to draft a guy like Justin Fields. And I think that's the thing that we're all going to watch, see who was wrong, who was right, to pass on Justin Fields, who I thought was the most talented quarterback in this class, and how exactly would that affect the Denver Broncos. And we talked about, I don't think we talked about Noah Fant.
No, yet.
But this is a good one. Top 5 or 6 tight end in the league. And he now I think out of all the guys, this might be the one that benefits the most, because if you're not a quarterback that's really comfortable doing all these other things, tight end is your best friend. He's your safety blanket. Where do you take him in comparison to some of the other tight ends around the league? Because I think there's a good crop of tight ends right now, and he might be somebody that slips just a little bit, and you can get him, and he might be just as productive as some of these other guys.
The talent is there. No offense, a freak. And it's all there for you. Last year got 95 targets, turned it into 93 targets. 62, 673, and 3. So you need those touchdowns to go up. Kind of profiled last year as more of a streaming tight end, but definitely where he's being ranked right now, he is currently ranked 9th behind Logan Thomas, who you know that I'm really big on. I think that he's going to have a really good year. And Robert Tonyan from Green Bay, who I think is actually going to regress, especially now when you think about Randall Cobb being back in the mix and how him and Aaron Rodgers are about to click. So he's about to lose targets away from there as well. So when it comes to who has a chance to be a top 5 guy outside of the top 5, I think Noah Fant is that. And it's absolutely right. the right thought process to say, hey, listen, he's going to slip. People are forgetting about him a little bit. You can take your shot on him. And then, hey, what? If worst comes and worst, he doesn't pan out week to week, then you play the tight end streaming game and you just hope for that touchdown and you hope that's where it's going. Honestly, you could say that about all the other tight ends after the top three. Pretty much. Everybody else is just kind of like you're hoping. But if anybody's going to take a step up, it is going to be Noah Fant. Love the talent, and he would fit really well with Teddy Bridgewater. So it depends, again, who wins this quarterback race. But Noah Fant, somebody who you're talking about right there, that 8 to 10 range, I like him a lot because he has a chance to be a top 5 guy.
Man, shoot, man, I appreciate you again dropping in knowledge on everybody, man.
Whoa,
hey, if you guys don't.
One more thing, we forgot the running backs.
Oh, snap.
Yep.
So I know because it's like, well, I think the Broncos probably forgot about their running backs too.
So is Melvin Gordon going to play?
Let's talk about them.
Is Melvin Gordon going to play? You know, he has the legal issues. They drafted Javonte Williams. Look,
okay,
right
now Williams, that's somebody that's intriguing.
Yes, very much. So last year was a mixed bag for Melvin, right? Pretty much every game you're hoping for a touchdown at this point. In the games that Denver needed to throw, he was not on the field at all. That's Phillip Lindsay's role at that point. Phillip Lindsay's now in Houston, but they draft Javonte Williams, right? So 8 games with double-digit fantasy points, right? Including 2 20-point games, but 7 single-digit fantasy games. 7 single digits from a running back too. That's awful. That sort of inconsistency is not what I'm looking for. Tossing his legal troubles, and they are going to use Javonte Williams. Melvin Gordon is firmly finding himself into the do not draft territory, but you know who I am going to draft is Javonte Williams. This is going to be somebody that you can get in the 6th round, and my profile, when I see him with the ball in his hands, he looks like Nick Chubb, right? And I think that his receiving upside is really, really not being talked about at all. When you talk about you can get him at 605, this is perfect for 0 RB drafters. You stack your team up with a whole bunch of wide receivers and an elite tight end, and boom, you get yourself Javonte Williams and wait for him to take over because he will take this backfield over. I do not see Melvin Gordon holding him off. Javonte Williams is that good. I am very big on him. Kind of wish the 49ers would have drafted him, but hey, he fell. So Melvin Gordon's this is his last year of his deal as well. You toss in the legal troubles, toss in the inconsistency. I'm staying far away from Melvin Gordon. Let somebody else draft Melvin Gordon. And even after week 1, if he scores 2 touchdowns and they come back to you and say, oh, ha, we'll see at the end of the year. I've got Javonte Williams taking over this backfield. That's the guy that I want. And if Melvin Gordon gets hurt or if there is some sort of suspension, Javonte Williams to the moon because I think he's that good and I think that he's going to have that sort of role.
I like when you say Javonte Williams to the moon.
To the moon. I can't wait.
All right. And shoot, man, that's going to do it. So next time we talk to Jason, will you be in California?
I am getting to Cali on Wednesday night.
Okay.
So if you the first practice against the Chargers is actually Thursday. They're actually going to let us film the 11 on 11s. So that's going to be, you know, we've been tweeting about like what we see, but I think that it's much easier to show the video of it. We just got to make sure that we don't put any music in it because Twitter's getting everybody for having music in their videos. Yeah, it's a cold world, real cold world. But I can't wait to do that. So yeah, next week, if it's Tuesday that we do the show, I'll be here, and if it's Thursday, then I'll be over there. But we're gonna get it done.
All right, man. And for everybody else, make sure if you're not already subscribed to the YouTube channel, hit that subscribe button right now. Hit that like button right now. I want to talk about the Bronco cornerbacks real quick. All right, let's talk about them.
Go for it.
Now, I think the interesting thing, and I don't have their roster in front of me, but there is some potential there, especially when you look at Ogulie. I don't even know how to say his name, but you got the cornerback that they just recently drafted. I mean, obviously with Patrick Surtain, that's the guy that stands out. I mean, the most. And we saw the video today, and that just reassured me for some of the thoughts I had on him pre-draft. Super patient, good hands, good feet. You know, I thought where he could improve is just his suddenness, but a lot of times he's ahead of the game because he's just so patient there, and he doesn't have to really get tested from a suddenness standpoint. So the play he made today, I mean, going chest to chest, knocking the ball away, that was awesome to see. And then you got Kyle Fuller. You know, I'm curious to see who ends up being, you know, the starters on the outside. Do they put Fuller in the nickel? I mean, like his brother has been somebody that slid into the nickel, but Kyle Fuller has been someone that's been more of a pure outside guy. But if they want to get, you know, Judy, I know I'm butchering his name. Yeah. If they want to get him in there and Surtain in there at the same time, with Fuller, somebody got to slide into that nickel spot. And you would think that it would be Fuller. So.
You know what's crazy about the Broncos? They have a loaded roster. They are one quarterback away. Like, if they were able to get Justin Fields or land Aaron Rodgers, we're talking about a completely different thing with this team because their skill position is loaded. But it's the quarterback, and their season is going to really depend on who the quarterback is and how that goes. That Drew Lock pick is not looking too good if already in year 3 that he's here, right? This is his 3rd year, right?
This is it for him, too.
Yeah,
this is it.
Yeah, this is it. So, like, the fact that you even have to have this competition with Teddy Bridgewater. Hey, listen, I love, rapping Jeezy lyrics too, but you don't get fantasy points for that, and you don't stay in the league for it. So, I mean, Drew Lock's got to do a little bit better, man.
Yeah, man. All right. So, again, I think this is my 3rd time closing this out. All right, we're gonna get back to y'all next Tuesday. Actually, I mean, if you guys want to stay on the YouTube channel, go ahead, because at the top of the hour, I got my guy Jasper Rose and myself coming on for Whiteout Wednesday, discussing all things 49ers receivers and prepping you guys for this upcoming preseason game. But until then, Jason, I appreciate you. Everybody, I appreciate you. Underdog Fantasy, make sure you guys go download the app right now. Subscribe, promo code Crocky, and we out. Peace.
Intercepted. It is picked off by Eric Walker. Over midfield, he'll run it all the way into the end zone. Touchdown.
Cross Talk TV podcast. Peace.